Hello and welcome to the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker, and in this episode we are continuing the conversation I had with David Snyder. This is part 2 of our conversation, and let's go ahead and jump right into it.
I want to address the fact that, you and I both have acquired disabilities, and I've known a lot of people, especially with my work with Centers for Independent Living, met a lot of people with a lot of different disabilities. And even where I went to college, Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, shout out to Edinburgh. I have haven't been back there since the day I graduated, but no offense to Edinburgh. But they were very well known for having a program for students with disabilities. And as far as I know, they still have that. They were a very wheelchair accessible school. They weren't listed in the top 10 of New Mobility's most recent publication where they rated accessibility of schools. But there, back to your ADA question, a lot more schools accessible. Colleges, I see a lot more lifts on school buses. Yeah, so now I'm going down another bunny trail.
It's all
But
good.
my point being, when I went away to college, I met a lot of people with congenital disabilities.
Okay.
Whether it was blindness or say cerebral palsy, things like that. And there's definitely, I can't imagine growing up having a disability from day one. I cannot, I know what it's like to have first 15 years of my life being able-bodied with no significant disability or nothing that I knew of. So I was very active physically. I water skied and played baseball and basketball and did a lot. I've played trumpet as well. That was my main instrument, but also played guitar and drums, and wasn't that great at either of those, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And would jam with my buddies and have a blast. And then boom, all of a sudden, I couldn't do any of that anymore.
Yep.
So getting to your question, I guess, wow, how did I adjust? In a nutshell, physically, hey, I put my nose to the grindstone. My family was very supportive. My friends were very supportive. My brothers especially, hey, they were my big brothers, and they always looked out for me.
Yeah.
And,
Ditto on my end with mine.
oh
So
my gosh.
I would have been lost without mine. So I feel you on that one.
So, and they were both very, very supportive, and I'll try not to tear up
Yeah,
talking
tears
about
are fine. Tears
talking
are
about my
okay.
brothers.
I'm a softie.
But
It's all right.
especially my oldest brother, Randy, who I haven't seen in several years, but he was at the rehab to see me a lot. My other brother, he was still, I think he was out of state. But my oldest brother, Randy, he was able to get to see me several times a week when I was in rehab, and that was an hour drive away from home. He pushed me and encouraged me, and I had great therapists. I'm still in touch. I'm friends on Facebook with my primary nurse from back then, Nancy. I'm friends with one of my main PT, Robin, and I just had a great rehab team, and I had great support, and I had the motivation to, heck, I wanted to be one of those guys. I remember on Happy Days, that's it, that Jim Harbaugh, I believe is who it was, episode of Happy Days I was probably, 8 or 9 years old. And this guy, Jim Harbaugh, again, I believe that's who it was. He, I forget the story behind it, but he was on the show. And I'll never forget, there was one scene where he and Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard, they come into the living room and they're talking about how they're playing basketball. That I wanted to be that guy. I saw a guy who was back in the 70s. It was probably the 70s. He was living life with a disability, and that's what I wanted. So
Yeah.
there's a seed right there that was planted way back when that benefited me greatly. So physically, man, I did great. I'm that sounds very arrogant, but
No, it's just
I
if that's how you feel about it, that's how you feel about it.
well, I look at it,
I didn't sound arrogant, not to me
well,
at
thank
least.
you. Thank you. I'm very happy, and I didn't want to use a power wheelchair. I wanted to use a manual wheelchair
Mhm.
because I didn't want to get fat, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
I'm
you were a
glad
teenager. It's okay. I
yeah.
mean, I get it.
And like I said, my buddies, hey, I was just Dave. I just couldn't walk now. I was still Dave, and hey, the girls still liked me. So, all right.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Physically, I addressed that part really well. Psychologically, man, I did not address the psychological aspect very well. And I didn't dive in. I was
Mhm.
afraid. I was afraid of the fear. I was
Mhm.
afraid of the emotion. And I grew up in a family, a hardworking family, and you didn't talk about your problems.
Yeah, that's kind of
You,
common. Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And I, yeah, I didn't address my psychological, the psychological part very well. And I'll never forget my brother Randy, who I referenced before. I remember one night I was talking with him at the hospital and at the rehab hospital, and I was like, "Yeah, man, they want me to talk to a shrink." And it wasn't no offense to psychiatrists, but it wasn't a psychiatrist. It was either maybe a social worker or a psychologist.
Mhm.
And I just felt weird about that because I didn't know anything about that. And he said, and he meant this in a supporting way, and I've never been angry at him about this, but it's something I wish he would not have said. And that is, "Oh, you're not crazy. You don't need a shrink."
Uh,
And again, he was being
yeah.
completely supportive. He
Yeah.
was totally supportive, and I've never been angry about that. But that was like a pivotal moment where, wow, he's right. I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I don't, and now crazy, I shouldn't
I know
say
what
that.
I know what you mean. I know. I
Because
do.
mental illness is a real
Yeah.
thing.
Yes, absolutely it is. But
And
in
I
the
want to address
context of
that.
how you mean it, I don't, he went like,
Yeah. He was
that
just
you didn't have some sort of
right.
psychological disorder that needed to be
Exactly.
addressed. Yeah.
Exactly. But I did have stuff that I needed to
Oh yeah.
address.
You had the trauma.
And I didn't. Right. And I carried that through life, and I see where it affected my friendships, my relationships, and I see where it affected my marriage.
Hmm.
And I got married in 1996, and we were married for I guess about 17 years. My ex-wife, we're still really good friends, and we only live like 10 minutes apart, and we're working together to raise our kids,
Good.
who are all adopted through foster care.
Awesome.
Um, she's fantastic. I love her, and we're still great friends. And we've talked about our relationship post divorce quite a bit, frankly. And it wasn't until after we were divorced that I actually talked with a psychologist.
Hmm.
And really, we tried. I tried talking with counselors over the years, but I don't know. I just wasn't. I didn't open up.
You have to be
The
ready.
me, the
Right.
light bulb, I wasn't ready to change.
Yeah. You have to be
And
ready for it.
right. And unfortunately, I didn't address it until later in life or later in my life. Fortunately, I did address it.
Yeah.
So, and my point there is I see where not addressing the psychological, shall I say, ramifications of my disability, that really negatively affected a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah.
And especially the most important relationships in my life.
Yeah.
So whenever I talk to people now who might be newly or more recently have a spinal cord injury more recently, or really not even anything like any kind of trauma, if I have the opportunity to say, don't be afraid to talk to
Yeah.
talk to somebody, talk to a counselor. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
In fact, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody should, in my opinion.
I
Almost
agree.
everybody. I mean, we all
Everyone could
have,
benefit. We all have stuff.
yeah,
We
yeah.
all at different times in our life. I just go with the general term therapy, but usually I've always seen a psychologist. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for finding that person who you can speak to and be open about it is critical, especially when you add trauma and you add loss and just living your life. You need to be able to move through that stuff and in a healthy, constructive way where you're not causing other people trauma and where you're able
Oh,
to,
right.
healthily move forward.
Yeah.
And it's critical.
And your couple things though, that came to mind while you were talking there. Your family and your friends are not your counselors. That
No.
is an unfair burden to
Yeah.
put on them. And I realize, hey, I'm guilty. You know, I'm the first one to say I am guilty of that. And, relying or yeah, relying on other people to be my counselor, not realizing I was doing it.
Yeah. I think
You
it's
know,
normal. So,
yeah.
I think
Oh, and
everybody does it. We trust them. I
oh,
think that's why.
and don't get me wrong. I mean, not that that's part of having a relationship,
Yeah.
whether it be a marriage or just a friendship. I mean, hey, there's that give and take, and we listen to each other. But at a certain point, yeah, there's issues that no, you don't need to burden your family and friends with all those details, especially if they don't have any training,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But
Bad
also,
advice is not good to get.
yeah, right, exactly. And also, maybe for anyone who might hear this and is thinking, wow, yeah, maybe I will talk to a professional. If you talk to somebody and it's not a fit, get a new counselor.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes. Yes.
any counselor that's good is going to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they're not going to be offended. They're
Yeah.
making their money either way.
Yeah.
And
And clergy, because some people, if they're very,
yeah,
there are qualified people within, every
exactly.
churches that you can speak to. It's not,
Oh
it doesn't
yeah,
have to be, a psychiatrist or a psychologist or
right. No, no, that's a great point.
wherever
And
the trust is, and who you need is who you need, but seek out a professional is what I tell people.
yeah, and yeah, I'm glad you brought up, the clergy, pastor, or a rabbi,
Yep.
or a priest, whomever. Especially if finances are an
Yeah.
issue. If your pastor or priest counsels you and you want to help by giving a little bit in the offering, fine, but that's not expected.
Yeah.
And
Seek out the help you need.
yeah, yeah, wow.
Yeah,
So what?
it's so important that the psychological aspect, especially of trauma, of any type of
Mm,
trauma, or loss, and because the truth is I had to mourn my loss of vision and give myself permission to mourn it because it was that kind of loss, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without seeking professional help.
yeah, I wasn't. I see where it's important to mourn the loss, and everybody's going to have a different way of mourning it.
Yeah,
It's going to take longer for some than others. I see where I didn't. I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't encouraged to. I also think, well, it's again, the light bulb has to want to change.
yeah,
Like I referenced earlier, you need to be ready to mourn it.
yeah.
And somebody are going to be ready right from the get go. And others, well, I'm thinking of the book I had to read in college on death and dying about the stages of death.
Oh, you've
There's
read
the,
that too, huh?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I don't remember much that I read, but I remember that one. But yeah, you have your denial phase and your bargaining and I forget, and then finally acceptance.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be different, and we're
Yeah, there's no one
um,
way to mourn. There's no one,
exactly,
and so we're all on our own journey. And I think
yeah,
it's important to allow yourself to go at your own pace and be okay with that,
Yeah.
and be
And
able to just not feel or try to push aside pressure that you have to be this. Or first of all, nobody should ever tell you what to feel, because your feelings are
right.
always real, they're always
Right.
valid.
Yeah,
um and just, but
exactly.
don't get stuck. And I think that's the hard part. Don't get stuck in your feelings. Even happiness, there, nothing should be a permanent state.
Right, right. If we're not experiencing various emotions, we're not in a healthy state.
Yeah,
You know,
we're
yeah,
supposed to feel
something,
all the feels, as I say.
yeah. But I do think, anger is the one that is less encouraged. And well, yeah,
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable to deal with someone's
yeah,
anger.
yeah. And how it
So,
manifests, I think, is important. How we deal with
right,
anger, how
of
we express
course.
it. Really, I think that's a challenge, is because there's always something underneath it. And that's the hard part, is getting to that.
And I don't want to spend too much more time here on the anger, but with me, I was raised in a conservative Christian home, and heck, I was I was angry with God.
Hmm.
Oh, but you can't be angry with God. Don't be, well, why not? Like,
Yeah.
I look at it now, it's like, okay, whether, whether you believe in God or not, let's just, let's just say we all believe in God
Yeah,
right
let's just
now.
roll with it.
All right. So let's go down this line of thought. And well, if you believe in God and you believe God's the creator of the universe, he's big enough, or she, the
Yeah,
entity God is big enough to handle your anger.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Should be.
And
Yeah, yeah.
right, right. And hey, the universe, if you want to think of it in that terms, the universe is big enough to handle your anger.
Hmm.
And, there's, but I guess I see that, I've seen that with me and with others
Yeah,
that I know have been, had similar upbringings where they weren't allowed to be angry at God
yeah.
and are
That's a
angry
great
with
point.
God.
That's a great point,
And
because how could you not be? How could you not be if that
well,
was how you
and
were brought up?
I look at it with in terms of our relationships on earth,
Hmm.
our relationships here, non-spiritual relationships, like it's important to be angry with your partner.
Yeah,
Like it's healthy
yeah,
because on the making up, it should be fun, right?
yeah,
No, but but a healthy relationship is going to have fights,
yeah. It's
and
going to
it's
have
going
ups
to
and
have
downs. Yeah,
making up, and it's going to have those days that are just hey, okay, hey, how you doing? And I see where I wasn't good at expressing my having a full relationship.
hmm.
Now I'm
In a
going
healthy way.
in a
In a
healthy
healthy way.
way, going way down a bunny trail. And who knows if I would have going back to our psychological stuff conversation, if I would have learned to that it was okay to be angry, and that was a natural part
Yeah,
of mourning my loss and dealing with the trauma of what happened. Wow, that may have helped me in other areas of my life, specifically, having healthier relationships.
yeah. I mean, we carry that stuff with us. That's the thing. If we
Oh
don't
yeah,
address, it's not like that. It doesn't go away. It stays with us, and if we don't address it, that anger, because it's real. And
yeah,
what, it did not, okay, well, where does the anger come? Being angry with God, going back to that, it makes a ton of sense. If you were raised within a church and that sort of religious framework, it doesn't, I don't understand how you couldn't be upset with God, because why would he do that? You know what I mean? Like that, it makes
right,
it perfect sense to
right,
me. And that's when, you would need to go speak to your clergy. You would need to go speak to, let that reconciliation happen in a way that's healthy and constructive, and addressing it in a way that you don't carry that anger forward. Then we cause damage to other people when we don't address it.
exactly.
That's such an important thing to address, is, because we're told when we're growing up to suppress the anger, and that it's, and not to address it in a healthy way, that we just, oh, don't be upset, don't be mad, don't be angry, don't be
Right.
all the
Don't be
negative,
healthy.
quote unquote, emotions, all the negative emotions, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But they're just emotions. They're all real.
Right. Right. Yep.
And we
And
have to deal with them if we want to be healthy and happy and all
exactly. I
that
was
kind
just
of
going to
fun
say
stuff.
it's healthiest to experience them all.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because life is meant to be dynamic, when we don't address the feelings that we have, that's when the bad stuff
Hmm.
sort of kicks in. So I want to circle back to something that you had mentioned
Yeah.
on the questionnaire I sent to you, because you specifically said that I needed to ask you about something.
Okay, let's keep
So,
talking. Let's keep talking here.
so I want to ask you about, has to do with a pool cue or something. Oh no,
Oh,
your calculus book or something. That when you
all
drop your
right, the
calculus book
calculus.
on
Hey,
the
I'll talk about my pool cue too. I pull cues,
Yes,
but
yes, you
yeah,
said
the
you had to.
calculus book. Oh my gosh, that's so great that you can say that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So I think one thing I've been successful, or one of the reasons I've succeeded in doing things, is I've been good at figuring out how to do things,
Hmm.
how to adapt.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I never thought of myself as a creative person because to me, creativity meant you could draw, you could paint, you were an artist.
Hmm.
And I always thought of creativity in that, in more of um, a narrow focus, I guess.
Yeah, and not a problem
But
solving sort of
yeah,
capacity.
yeah. And but I started to realize, wow, I guess I am kind of creative. And I'm good at something happens, I drop something, and how am I going to pick that up? Usually sometimes the first thing I do is say something that you'd have to bleep out here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's normal. I do the
and
same thing.
and hope my kids aren't around to hear it. But anyway, I was in college, and well, this is my process. I dropped the calculus book, and it's a three semester book. It's a thick, big book, and I was in my room alone, and I don't know if I was getting ready to go to class or what. Bottom line is, I dropped this book on the floor. Crap! How am I going to pick this up?
Hmm.
There's nobody around. I don't want to. I got to get going, or maybe I just didn't want to ask for anybody's help.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm gonna find a way to pick this up. Well, as every good college student does, I had milk crates in my room. So I took a milk crate that didn't have much in it, emptied it out, put that on the floor on its side, took the calculus book, and I probably flipped it partially open. I lined it up next to the milk crate, flipped it open, and like a little bit at a time, moved it into the just by leaning over my chair, um, flipped it into the milk crate,
Hmm.
and then I was able to get my hand in the milk crate and pick up the milk crate and set that on my bed. And okay, great, I can get the calculus book off my bed and right onto my lap because I can use two hands to do it.
Yeah.
Now, the whole problem was I couldn't just reach down with one hand, grab it, and pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you gonna get off
So,
the floor?
right. So, um, I've become good at solving my problems
Hmm.
with whatever I have at hand,
Yep.
or seeing
That's.
something. Like for instance, I said, I'm sorry, you're going to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, because I say all the time to to people, regardless as to what their disability is, that it can be your superpower if you can change your perception and your mindset to that it is a superpower, because that problem solving ability is an advantage,
Oh
especially
yeah,
like from an employment standpoint into a company, and like it is your superpower if you can embrace it.
yeah, and yeah, solving one problem helps solve another. I won't say
Yeah.
it helps solve the next. Well, but it helps solve another one. And
Yeah.
like, oh well, last time I did it this way, but if I use this or do it this way, it'll probably be a little easier, or it could be a little easier. It isn't always. So yeah, life's just a grand string of experiments,
Yeah.
in problem solving.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mentioned earlier, before you were recording, about my musical involvement,
Hmm.
and how back in the '80s I got a synthesizer and a card for my Apple IIe. Yes, very old computer, Apple IIe that had dual floppy drives and maybe 512K of RAM. Yes, kids, Google that. if you
Yeah.
need to.
Super fast computer.
Oh my gosh. So, yeah, yeah. But and anyway, I after I was injured, I didn't think I'd be able to do anything musically.
Mhm.
But then I went to a music store and this guy showed me this stuff. Okay, cool. So I figured out how I could make some music note by note. But that was really tedious. And I wrote some things that I still have on tape. Well, I have them converted to MP3 now, but still have them. But I wanted to do something in more real time
Hmm.
and not do everything one step at a time. So I thought, if I use the sustain pedal that holds the notes, I could do maybe that could help me do some stuff. So I took a little sustain pedal that came with the keyboard, and it's metal with like a guitar cord attached to the end and rubber on one side. I stuck that thing in my mouth. Okay, yeah. So I'm like, all right, drooling all over myself, and figured out, ooh, I bet I could make something. Make a long story short, took it apart and I saw that it was very simple. And I ended up getting a guitar cord, cut it in half, stripped the wires, got a clothespin, and put a couple of screws in that, and basically attached the wires to the two screws. And when the clothespin was closed, there was no sustain because I was then able to plug it
Hmm.
into the keyboard. When the
Oh, that's
clothespin was
cool.
closed, there was no sustain. When I bit down on the clothespin, the circuit was open, I guess. So
Yeah.
there was sustain. So I learned how to play some simple, some simple chords using two hands. Certain chords I could play with one hand, depending, on how the keys fell. But I could play somewhat in real time. And hey, it's not going to be anything that's going to get me to Carnegie Hall or even down at the local fire hall for that matter. But it was something I could do, and
Yeah.
I could record things, and maybe record, the right hand of a piano part or a keyboard part, record the right hand with my two hands, and then go back and re-record the left hand part with my two hands, and then maybe go back and record something else.
Yeah.
And hey, I had fun, and that was just another exercise in problem solving.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I mean, as we talked about before, done music production and all that kind of stuff before. And I think that is, to me, that's really cool that you could figure that out and how to do it. Like touching back to the name of the podcast, dissing my ability is we don't ever want to do that to ourselves. Like, oh, I can't do that. Well, why not? And probably,
Right.
and figuring it out, like, okay, you had to do a workaround, sure. But I think that's so cool that you figured that out in that way. Like, that's hella creative in my in my view. I
Thanks.
think that's awesome. And I think, that just goes back, if you don't have if you didn't have to problem solve and you didn't have to figure that stuff out, um, if the disability wasn't there, that never would have been something to solve. And so one
Right.
thing that I think a lot of people don't really fully recognize is the world is more accessible to everybody, oftentimes because of the creative things that have been adapted or created for people with disabilities.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's
Hey,
really important. I think that, we make the world a better place.
curb cuts were put in to accommodate people in wheelchairs or people who use wheelchairs. I don't want to get too politically correct
Ah,
with my
you're
terminology,
you're okay.
but hey, you know, okay, curb cuts were put in for that purpose, and but everybody uses them,
Yeah, they
and
benefit everybody.
right, and man, they benefit everybody, and yeah, that's just one example that that I can think of in that vein.
Yeah. Well, another thing is, the bump, not the bump dots, the on the curb, for the the
like the
the
tactile.
domes that are at those places on curbs where those are for people that are blind
Yeah,
for their canes. Most people think they're for wheelchairs. I'm like, nope.
yeah,
That's
yep. And
not what they're for.
the only reason I
Truncated domes,
know,
that's what they're called. Truncated domes. I knew it would come to me.
I never knew the name of those. Thank you. I did know that they were, for people who were blind or visually impaired. How did I know that? Well, somebody who was blind told me, educated me on that. But yeah, I benefit as well because, oh wow, there have been times I wasn't paying attention and I feel the bumps. It's like, oh, okay,
Time to stop. Yeah.
yeah, time to look both ways before I, you know, get hit by a car.
Yeah, everyone benefits, because they're yellow and there's the contrast. And so
Yeah,
but if there were no blind people, they wouldn't be there. So as a society, we wouldn't benefit from that innovation. So, I don't think we should never sell ourselves short in terms of what we contribute to society as a whole, because of our disability. We make everybody's life better when we are embraced and when we actually try to create greater access and focus on the things that are important, I think.
I just thought of something else. If I could,
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
yeah, and maybe this is because as you were, as you're talking there, I'm just envisioning myself out on the street, and people have often come up and said, I really admire you, or wow,
Mhm.
you're such an inspiration. That's what it is.
Yeah, I hear too.
Ooh, and there have been times where somebody says that and it's like, I want to
Hmm.
growl at them. I don't know. I just want to live my life. I don't want to be an inspiration.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
And, okay, but that is something I've thought about a lot. And I would say, hear me out here, Ken,
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
and anyone listening, okay? I understand why any one of us who has a disability would cringe at the very least to just a perfect stranger coming up to us and saying, "You're such an inspiration,"
Hmm.
and not necessarily, the best way to start a conversation. But you know, I got thinking about that some more, and we as humans, we all need inspiration.
Yeah.
Hey, we're living in this thing called life, as Prince said. Let's get through this thing called life,
Yep. Good
and
reference.
we're all. Thank you. I'll refrain from doing my Prince imitation. Dilly beloved, no, I won't quote. I won't quote any more of the song. Um, but
No, don't go crazy on
okay,
me.
okay. Oh,
Okay.
nice
Ding.
reference. Nice reference. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna listen to some Prince when we get off
All
here.
right. So I
But
didn't mean to
no,
interrupt you.
no, no. But we're all living this tough thing called life. We all need inspiration,
Yeah.
and I maybe next time somebody just out of the blue says you're such an inspiration, try to take it as the way it's intended.
Yeah.
And I try to do this myself. And because I look at, wow, I gain inspiration if I'm out and about and I see well, I will see, say, a young mom or a young woman with three kids, one in a stroller, two, she's, you know, has them keeping her eye on them and they're doing something. Wow. Now I'm forming my own story, but I look at that and the little story I put on her is, wow, she's a single mom and she looks like she's doing a great job
Yeah.
with those kids. That may be completely inaccurate. Just like somebody who forms an opinion of me, seeing me in my wheelchair, is more than likely pretty darn inaccurate. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
because that story that they made up, hey, that's helping them get through the day. Just like the story I made up about that woman who I perceived as being a single mom with three kids, killing life,
Yeah.
killing it. That helped me get through the day.
Yeah. I
Or,
think to your point, because I think maybe one of the reasons it kind of rubs us the wrong way is because they don't see the struggle. If
Yeah.
they don't
Oh,
see the
yeah.
struggle. And
Of
so to hear
course.
you're an inspiration, you're like, oh, you don't know how hard it is to put a
Right.
smile on
And
sometimes. But
right.
that's not their problem.
Exactly.
And so, I think getting back to, what is inspiration? And it's something that makes you want to do something or gives you an idea or makes you want to be creative or makes you it's a positive. It makes it, tell it somebody saying that I'm an inspiration or you're an inspiration or whatever. It's that person has thought of something good because of you.
And what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Nothing. You know?
Absolutely
Wow.
nothing.
I love how you said that.
I
I
don't want
love
to.
how
I
you
want to
said that.
save people from the struggle that I've had. I don't want them to have to endure it. Um, that's. I'm not. I don't think it's fair to try to put that on somebody else. Oh well, I'm not going to be an inspiration because you don't know the crap that I have to deal with. Well, that's my crap, not theirs.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so, well, I think that is a fabulous place to end is on inspiration because I think you're an inspiration on honestly. So because
Well, thank you,
your
Ken.
attitude is phenomenal, and so and I love people like you, and also we share common interests in music and stuff like that. So I think that's even cooler.
Well, I hope we get to talk again
Absolutely.
someday. And man,
So where
thanks
can
for.
people? Yeah, go ahead. Oh,
No, I
uh,
was just going to say thanks for having me on, and thanks to our friend. I won't mention her name,
yeah,
but
she knows who she is.
yes, that's right. So thank you for the introduction,
Yes,
and
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and having this fabulous conversation. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you? And there'll be links in the description as well. But if you could let them know.
They can find me on the internet.
Ooh.
No, but okay. Here's something I've been working on and been in my head for a while. It's www.fishingforimages.com. So www.fishingforimages.com. That is a website that I'm just starting to bring up. If you go there, you may, well, if you go there right now, Ken, you're going to see nothing, really. But I'm something I'm working on, and photography is one of my hobbies. I've adapted for that as well, but we didn't get into that. That's okay. But um, photography is a way for me to get out and experience nature and get to places that I can't maybe physically get to.
Yeah.
And pictures worth 1,000 words. And I love that. And, it's me going out. It's about the process, just like fishing is about the process, more than about the catching.
Yeah.
So I see photography for me as a fishing process, if you will. I'm not fishing for fish. I'm fishing for images. And, it's all about that process. So that's where you'll be able to find me. And if you want to email me, you just send something to Dave, Dave, at fishingforimages.com.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. What you just said actually made me think of something because like I don't see stars anymore, because I have some
Oh,
music, but I am
wow.
and I am fascinated with astronomy and all things space because I can't see it anymore. It's just it's so interesting that you talked about photography and it's like I don't want to go to space, but I can't see it anymore. I don't see the stars. I don't see any of that kind of stuff. And so my only mechanism to engage with it is through, the web and shows and things like that. So that's really interesting perspective there, and that was really cool.
Well, in light of that, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was thinking, knowing that you have a vision disability, I got thinking. I was like, oh my gosh, like how can I make this site more accessible for people who are blind or visually impaired, and maybe make it more like a blog where I give a detailed description of each photo.
Yep,
And hey,
descriptive
here's a
text.
photo. If you can see it, great. If you can't, let me help or
Yep,
do my best to help.
yep.
So
That's the best
let's
thing
help
that
each
like
other out.
that absolutely is. It makes a world of difference with to have that on images and stuff like that to have descriptive text.
So
Absolutely,
I may pick your brain a little bit on that in the future, Ken.
absolutely. Feel free to.
Very good.
All right. Thank you so much. This was a
You
fantastic
are very
conversation.
welcome, and thank you.
Fantastic. This has been the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker. I would encourage you to subscribe, like, and share. And please tune in to each new episode and be kind to others and to yourself. Have a good week.